Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Jenna considered herself very brave and determined. Girls of a different temperament had a much harder time surviving in the orphanage. They were beaten, searched for, their food and toys were taken away. And if they complained to the educators, life turned into a real nightmare. Jenna understood this immediately, and she was determined that she would not let them do this to her. And from the age of 5, she fought back against her bullies. She fought silently and furiously, like a cornered animal, using her nails and teeth. So soon she was left alone. Crazy. But she was better off not being messed with. The second conclusion Jenna made at the same age: no one loves her and will never love her. First, Daddy left for another family. Then her mom started singing and disappeared too, in an unknown direction. And the aunt with the eternally screaming girl turned her over to an orphanage after a couple of months. And it's true. Why would a young woman need such a burden? She needed to get her own life together. So now, grown up, Jenna understood her. It didn't make her feel any better though. It was bittersweet to realize that you were superfluous. Adopt sullenly, bought from under a bee with green eyes. No one wanted the girl, and that too confirmed Jenna's conclusion that no one wanted her and she didn't need anyone. It was easier and clearer that way. This was the principle by which she lived on all sides. Didn't get close to anyone, reluctantly following the instructions of the caretakers. Not participating in the life of the orphanage. So when the mentee Jenna, having reached a certain age, finally left the institution, everyone, including herself, breathed a sigh of relief. And then came the first miracle in her life. The mayor's office, following some order from above, generously allocated a miserable, the personal apartment to the orphan. After receiving the keys, Jenna even slept with them. The first time she clutched it in her fist, so she could not believe that these mansions her own, and in the toilet you can lock yourself in and wash as much as you want. What a blessing that is. Having mastered the specialty of saleswoman, Jenna got a job at the nearest store from home and began to fold her salary, dreaming of how to furnish her room with new furniture. In the meantime, I had to sleep on the cot and my neighbor's kindness. But that's not a problem. The main thing is it's all just hers. No one will take it away and do not have to share. To approximate the dream of new furniture, she washed in the evenings, floors, drive, toilets. The bosses rejoiced at the opportunity to save money on her cleaning job. In addition, Jenna turned out to be pathologically honest. Customers do not get cheated, and was happy when she got stale products. In fact, the products were good. It was picky of her customers, who turned their noses up when they saw the date, so life was slowly getting better. And Jenna even began to think that fate had decided to repay her for all her past ordeals. She finally believed in her luck when she met Martin. The cute guy spoke to her in the store, asking for advice on which candy to choose. Jenna honestly pointed out not the most expensive, but quality and delicious. She couldn't afford those. But the girls told her that the sweets tasted amazing and the markup was minimal. The next day, the guy came back to thank her mom. I really liked the candy, and she's a greeter, he said with the most charming smile, and from that, becoming completely irresistible. You are so well versed in all the goods. Have you tasted everything? Maybe you can recommend me some cheese. The girls told me about the candy, Jenna confessed. I've never even tried them. It's really expensive for me. But about the cheese, yes, I would. Take this one. Thank you. The guy looked at her in surprise and disappeared between the shelves. He returned indeed with the cheese she recommended, and also with a box of chocolates exactly the same as yesterday. Only just paid for it. He held out the box to Jenna. What do you want? Don't. Scared the girl. Please take it, he smiled. You are a very professional salesman. Consider it a bonus. Oh, we don't do that here. Completely confused Jenna. And just a pretty girl, I have the right to give a gift. The guy winked. My name is Martin and yours is Jenna. The girl pointed to her name tag. Jenna, can you tell me, what do you do after work in the evening? Going home. Jenna blurted out, blushing profusely. It was like no one had ever spoken to her. She had gotten such a reputation in the orphanage that the boys themselves shunned her. So much so that she knew nothing about relationships except what the girls told each other in the evenings, giggling. Then she decided that she shouldn't do such nonsense. Some kind of romance that made you laugh and cry. She had no time to fool around. Why don't we go for a walk? Martin suggested. Is it nice weather? Or do you have a family to rush? There's no family business to cook dinner, and you have to heat it up. That's all. Jenna was so embarrassed that she was telling the plain truth. So I'll wait. 8 p.m., the guy decided that since there was no rejection, it was consent, and he disappeared out the door. Jenna, who's that? Curious fat girl Julia peeked out of the nearby register. All this time she burned with curiosity, listening to the conversation. Just a regular customer person. Jenna shrugged her shoulders. She still couldn't come to her senses. Things were moving so fast. He asked her out, winked at Julia. Was he cute? Jenna stared at her. Only now she realized she had a date. Oh, mommy. What is she going to wear? Old jeans? And for what? We're not going on a date with a sweater. Jenna said in a droopy voice. I have nothing to wear. Julia looked at her silently, then grabbed her cell phone. Cindy, you're a size S. That's fine. Share a dress for a good man. I've got a Cinderella to dress for her first ball. Okay, I'll see you in an hour. Seeing the round eyes, Jenna looked at her. Julia laughed. Come on. You're dragging my clothes will be hanging out on you. And my sister is a big shot like me. They change her clothes all the time. So for her it's no problem at all. And you should feel like a princess. What if this is your destiny? Julia, why are you helping me? Barely heard, said Jenna, feeling the tears come to her eyes. She constantly fought with life and people. It was very difficult to accept someone else's participation. It's just the way Julia shrugged. I see how you break down to make money. The girls said that you grew up without parents. Did they? Really, Jenna didn't ask where the information came from. It's a small town. The staff, including the bosses, are women. So someone hears something and then it happens. Everyone's already in the loop. So there's no one to help. It's not hard for me. Julia went back to work. Consider this conversation over. Jenna, too, was distracted by the impending meeting with Martin. Fortunately, there were plenty of customers in the store. An hour later, a girl who looked like Julia, only skinny and very much makeup, brought dresses and shoes. They fit and felt incredibly good on Jenna. She even had a hard time recognizing herself in the mirror. Thank you. I will wear them very carefully. And I'll return it today, Jenna said, pressing her hands to her chest. The sisters looked at each other. I'll get it for you, Cindy said. Cindy brushed it off. It's not trendy anymore. I don't wear that stuff, so consider it a gift. You guys, thank you. Jenna couldn't find the words in us. Tears were somewhere close for her never cried. Even in a lot of pain, it was new to her. Make sure the first date is memorable for life, and then the second, third, and so on until the wedding. The girls clearly enjoyed teasing her, but giggling to their heart's content. Cindy ran off and Julia went back to work. Jenna, on the other hand, was counting the hours until the end of the day. It seemed to her that the hands were frozen in place. Time dragged on so slowly, and the closer it was to 8, the harder her heart pounded. Clothesline, clothesline. Only she doesn't know how to behave, what to say, how to react. She was really scared, probably for the first time since she was a little girl, and she thought she wasn't afraid of anything. He was waiting for her outside with flowers. Accepting the bouquet, Jenna was completely lost. It seems that he guessed how she felt, because he just walked along, telling her some funny stories from his life. And soon the girl realized with amazement that the feeling of awkwardness disappeared without a trace, and she is already laughing at his jokes. And the bouquet did not bother her at all. On the contrary, she carried it, proudly looking at passersby. Does everyone see that she was once in an orphanage? Jenna walks with the flowers next to a handsome guy. Passersby did look back at them, smiling, and it made her feel light and happy. They walked for 2 hours, and then Martin walked Jenna home and stopped in front of Jenna. I hate to break up with you, he admitted. I feel like I've known you all my life, and I was surprised to hear her admit it. She really felt very at ease around him. She also felt incredibly beautiful, light, and joyful. She was about to jump up and fly over the rooftops. I won't ask for coffee, though I'd like to. Martin continued. With a look of regret, he held up his hands. I don't have any coffee, Jenna admitted. I drink tea. Coffee is very expensive. Candy like that requires coffee, Martin declared. Let's go. There's a convenience store nearby. Not listening to her objections, he dragged her to the expensive convenience store, where he meticulously chose the elite drink. Here triumphantly, he declared, You won't have a nightcap in the morning. You won't have time to drink it. I'm not going to sleep anyway, admitted Jenna. I too, heartily said Martin. I will think about you. Jenna. With these words, he kissed her unexpectedly on the lips and quickly walked away. She remained standing, holding a bag of candy and a can of coffee worth a third of her salary. When the ability to move, Jenna returned, went up to her apartment and immediately, breaking Martin's instructions, brewed a divine drink. She drank the coffee, took a bite of the candy a little at a time, and remembered that magical evening. Could I really be that lucky? She thought. Could this cute and funny guy really pay attention to me? Or was there a catch? He must be married, or some kind of maniac. But she remembered Martin's good-natured, open face and felt ashamed. He wasn't a maniac, and there was no ring on his finger. Just a normal, nice guy, and stopped thinking of himself as a third-rate commodity. The coffee was really good and strong, but she was so worried, she fell asleep almost immediately. And in the morning, she woke up refreshed and happy. Martin came in the evening by closing time, and they went out again the next day and the third. And then came the evening when he offered to have tea together. Jenna knew what usually followed such tea parties and was ready to take the relationship to the next level. If it weren't for one thing, Martin, I would have invited you, she admitted, looking him in the eye. The only furniture I have at home, a cot and a stool. A neighbor gave it to me before we settled in. I'm saving up, but it's not going well. You have a cot, don't you? He smiled, not pretending to be surprised. And a stool is a luxury. It could be used as a table, for dinner for two. Jenna felt the lump in her throat melt away, preventing her from breathing. Let's go then, and they went up to her little fortress together. After looking at Jenna's mansion, Martin said thoughtfully, It would be nice to have a cupboard here. The refrigerator will be small for now. I have one. I'll bring it tomorrow. But we'll have to do something about the bed. You don't get much rest on a bed like this. Martin, what did you just ask Jenna? I'm thinking about your living space. Martin said seriously. It's luxurious, of course, but it would be nice to buy some things. Otherwise, she would have definitely messed up today. In the evening, they met at the same place. True, Martin arrived by car. Jenna, her eyes rounded. It wasn't a cheap car, though of course she didn't know much about it, but she knew the logo. Was it yours? She said with admiration. Ours, corrected her Martin and hurried away. Let's go. I have dinner to prepare. We have to celebrate our engagement. We didn't have time yesterday and we are engaged, aren't we? Jenna knew she was asking stupid questions, but she couldn't stop herself. Martin looked at her and slapped his forehead. Right. Here I am absent-minded. With those words, he solemnly got down on one knee, right on the sidewalk. He held out his hand to her and said, Jenna, will you do me the honor by agreeing to be my wife? The girl stared dumbfounded at his hand in the palm of her hand, a ring glittering in the open box. What is it? Is it really for me? She asked. And you see something else here. Martin was surprised. Do you even have an example? What if I have the wrong size? Jenna timidly took the soft ring and tried it on, admiring the jewelry the ring had to fit. And it looked insanely beautiful and expensive. A girl who has never worn jewelry before. Expensive jewelry was very disturbing. It must have cost more than I could earn in a year. She said aloud. Martin stepped in. What did you think? Could I really give you cheap trinkets? Jenna got worried, thinking he was offended. But the guy immediately laughed. Jenna, it's just silver with the smallest diamonds. I get you something much more expensive, but you wouldn't wear it. You hide it. I'm right. Jenna nodded her head. I am secretly surprised and glad that I understand her innermost thoughts so well. You didn't answer, reminded Martin expectantly, looking at her. Yes, of course I did. It seemed to the girl that the world around her swirled, shone with bright colors. Then I am the happiest man, Martin declared. Let's go home soon, and I'll make the best dinner. I can do it, honestly. Jenna was in such a state that even ordinary potatoes from his hands would have seemed like a gourmet treat. Martin, however, really knew a thing or two about Bavarian art. He prepared the meat, the salad to the gestures of a magician, and retrieved a bottle of light wine. The refrigerator installed in the kitchen hummed softly. In addition, Martin had thoughtfully brought a second stool and a girl. It seemed that there was nothing better than the two of us sitting like this on a small loaf. Every now and then we kissed, sipping the delicious wine that made us so sweetly dizzy. And then there was a sequel, even sweeter and more wonderful. True, Martin dispelled the charm when he said, "But no, something must be done about the bed. This is some kind of gymnastic sketch." But Jenna just laughed and reached out to him. So he forgot his displeasure. In the morning, however, Martin returned to the same old theme of Jenna's life. Move in with me. You have to pack, only to sign. All things in one bag will fit. Something made the girl freak out. It's a small apartment, but it's her own. She's the boss of the place. What would it be like if they started to live together? In addition, there was another reason quite mundane. The rent took the lion's share of her earnings, and to give the money away, it was just so pathetic. Even now, Jenna figured that if she and Martin were to live together, she'd have to pay half of the rent. Seeing her confused face, Martin drank in what she was thinking and laughed loudly. When she found out the real reason, she laughed. He said, "You're my housekeeper. Everything is much easier. Your apartment can be sold. And in my territory, you can live for free." "I can't do that," Jenna said, fighting for independence. "I'll teach you," he said softly. Takes the girl to the cot, not a cozy rookery of staples, and folded. Laughing. They rose from the floor. "Now you agree." Martin pointed his finger at the failed cot. "I agree," Jenna promised. Right now, though, she was knee-deep in the sea. She could go anywhere with him. "Then find a buyer for your shack and move," calmly said Martin when the door closed behind him. The girl sat in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the sound of the refrigerator and smiling. What was that supposed to mean? Was she wrong that no one wanted her? There's a man who does. They care. To live with her. Wants to call her his wife. Wife pronounced Jenna syllable by syllable and even squeezed her eyes shut with pleasure. She imagined a new unknown but surely wonderful life with a spacious apartment, a loving and loving husband, and a child. Preferably two, a boy and a girl. The very real family she had never had. And now she would have. She looked around with new eyes, looking around her place. Surely hovels after all. And this is where she was going to point out the whole century. Yes, Jenna, you don't have high standards of living. Things will be different from now on. Yes, things moved quickly from there. She advertised the apartment for sale. And the next night, Martin moved her and her belongings to her new place of residence. Jenna went from room to room. I marveled that only one person could live in such a huge apartment. Surely he must be lonely here. Besides, how much cleaning is one? When she shared these thoughts with Martin, he laughed for a long time. Then he explained that he had nothing to do with it. The mansion came from the grandfather of a professor, a winner of many awards. He was very much favored by the state. As for the cleaning, then there are specially trained people to deal with it. But no, the girl made a mental note. No more strange women in our apartment. What am I without hands? It was a pleasure to clean here. Martin's apartment really looked like a museum or an old manor house, furnished luxuriously with excellent taste, Jenna, and walked around the rooms like sightseers, looking at pictures, photographs in elegant frames. This is the grandfather and grandmother. With the look of an experienced tour guide, Martin explained. Otherwise, she would have definitely messed up today. In the evening, they met at the same place. True, Martin arrived by car. Jenna, her eyes rounded. It wasn't a cheap car, though of course she didn't know much about it, but she knew the logo. Was it yours? She said with admiration. Ours, corrected her Martin and hurried away. Let's go. I have dinner to prepare. We have to celebrate our engagement. We didn't have time yesterday and we are engaged, aren't we? Jenna knew she was asking stupid questions, but she couldn't stop herself. Martin looked at her and slapped his forehead. Right, here I am absent-minded. With those words, he solemnly got down on one knee, right on the sidewalk. He held out his hand to her and said, Jenna, will you do me the honor by agreeing to be my wife? The girl stared dumbfounded at his hand in the palm of her hand, a ring glittering in the open box. What is it? Is it really for me? She asked. And you see something else here? Martin was surprised. Do you even have an example? What if I have the wrong size? Jenna timidly took the soft ring and tried it on, admiring the jewelry the ring had to fit. And it looked insanely beautiful and expensive. A girl who has never worn jewelry before. Expensive jewelry was very disturbing. It must have cost more than I could earn in a year. She said aloud. Martin stepped in. What did you think? Could I really give you cheap trinkets? Jenna got worried, thinking he was offended. But the guy immediately laughed. Jenna, it's just silver with the smallest diamonds. I get you something much more expensive, but you wouldn't wear it. You hide it. I'm right. Jenna nodded her head. I am secretly surprised and glad that I understand her innermost thoughts so well. You didn't answer, reminded Martin expectantly, looking at her. Yes, of course I did. It seemed to the girl that the world around her swirled, shone with bright colors. Then I am the happiest man, Martin declared. Let's go home soon, and I'll make the best dinner. I can do it, honestly. Jenna was in such a state that even ordinary potatoes from his hands would have seemed like a gourmet treat. Martin, however, really knew a thing or two about Bavarian art. He prepared the meat, the salad to the gestures of a magician, and retrieved a bottle of light wine. The refrigerator installed in the kitchen hummed softly. In addition, Martin had thoughtfully brought a second stool and a girl. It seemed that there was nothing better than the two of us sitting like this on a small loaf. Every now and then we kissed, sipping the delicious wine that made us so sweetly dizzy. And then there was a sequel, even sweeter and more wonderful. True, Martin dispelled the charm when he said, but no, something must be done about the bed. This is some kind of gymnastic sketch. But Jenna just laughed and reached out to him. So you forgot his displeasure. In the morning, however, Martin returned to the same old theme of Jenna's life. Move in with me. You have to pack, only to sign. All things in one bag will fit. Something made the girl freak out. It's a small apartment, but it's her own. She's the boss of the place. What would it be like if they started to live together? In addition, there was another reason quite mundane. The rent took the lion's share of her earnings, and to give the money away. It was just so pathetic. Even now, Jenna figured that if she and Martin were to live together, she'd have to pay half of the rent. Seeing her confused face, Martin drank in what she was thinking and laughed loudly. When she found out the real reason she laughed, he said, "You're my housekeeper. Everything is much easier. Your apartment can be sold. And in my territory, you can live for free." "I can't do that," Jenna said, fighting for independence. "I'll teach you," he said softly, takes the girl to the cot, not a cozy rookery of staples, and folded, laughing. They rose from the floor. "Now you agree." Martin pointed his finger at the failed cot. "I agree," Jenna promised. "That's me being small funny." Jenna imagined that one day they'll have that same bigger eye. And a boy who looks like Daddy and like her. How will she love him? Who's that? She stopped at the picture. A woman very beautiful, luxuriously dressed, but as it seemed to her, with a cold and appraising gaze. "Oh, that's Mother," Martin explained. "She is such a queen to me. That's what Mother Martin is like. She must be very picky. And they haven't even met yet. And the father?" she asked, trying to calm down. "I don't have a father." Abruptly, he said, "And I beg you never to mention him again, especially in front of your mother. She raised me. She made me the main person in my life." "And what about me?" Jenna didn't ask, but he skewed his tongue in time. He just hasn't gotten used to her being the main person in his life now. And Mother, no matter how strict she was, she wouldn't eat her well. Loving the tone of an obedient girl, Jenna pronounced. Martin fell silent, then smiled, and the familiar expression returned to his face. and in his eyes the familiar fire lit up. "Jenna, I didn't show you the conspirator in that voice," he said, dragging her into the bedroom. And in a couple of minutes, she realized that making love on a wide bed is much more comfortable than on an old, crumbling cot. And all bad thoughts scattered, giving way to excitement and joy. The next morning, Martin drove her to work. The girls noticed the change in her appearance. They nodded with a wink, and Jenna just glowed. Feeling renewed, beautiful, happy, Martin promised to pick her up tonight, take her to a restaurant, have dinner, and discuss the details of the upcoming wedding. Everything inside her was singing, and she smiled at the girls, absent-mindedly accepting congratulations. The day flew by like 1 minute, and after changing into the dress that Julia and her sister had given her, Jenna was the first to rush out the door. Martin was already standing outside the store, smiling at Jenna. "Don't you worry about it. I invited Mom to the restaurant. You have to meet her, don't you?" he pronounced, kissing her with a long, gentle kiss, just like Mom. Already silly, the girl asked, almost dropping her purse from her hands. "And when did you plan to meet at the wedding?" He laughed and took her palm in his favorite too. "I have a brave." Just nodding. "Don't argue, and everything will be fine." "Okay," responded Jenna. However, she was really very scared. She had no experience with other people's mothers. She could barely remember her own, and she entered the restaurant with a folding heart. Martin led her to the table at which she was seated, her back very straight and proud, her chin in the grains. A very pretty lady. Jenna wouldn't have given her the look of 40. However, the sharp things in her eyes spoiled the impression and told her that this woman had long ago made her view of life far from flattering. "Meet. Mom, this is my Jenna." Martin emphasized the intonation of the word "my Jenna." "And this is Adriana, my beloved mother." "Hello, sweetheart." The lady stretched out at once, as if assessing the girl from head to toe. And Jenna definitely realized that the assessment was a C+. But she found the strength to let out a smile and said, "Hi, it's very nice to meet you." There was nothing pleasant about this acquaintance, however. Jenna sat as if she were a hypnotist. Her hands were shaking. She tangled with the cutlery and finally dropped a piece of fish under the table. Under the mocking gaze of her potential mother-in-law, she reached to pick it up, and Martin barely had time to hold her up and sit her down. It was mostly mother and son talking. It was obvious that they were on the same wavelength, and Jenna was unable to get a word in edgewise. When she was finally settled and she felt that she really had to go to the bathroom, and scarlet with embarrassment, she whispered her needs to Martin. He pointed out to her which way was the ladies' room. Behind her, the girl heard scraps of conversation. "Martin, you can see for yourself that she's no match for you. The girl is hopelessly stupid and will constantly embarrass you in society." "Mom, let me make up my own mind for once in my life." "You're wrong. I'm a mother, and I can see that very well." Jenna thought she was going to faint. In the bathroom, she washed her face to cool the riot, a new face. "Nothing." Through gritted teeth, she said, staring at her reflection in the mirror. "Your power is gone, Adriana. In fact, you should mind your own life and stay out of ours." Reluctantly, she returned to her seat. She had the strength not to show that she had heard unpleasant conversations. And yet the rest of the evening passed in suspense. The conversation about the wedding, as Jenna pointed out, did not come up. She only exhaled when the cab with Adriana pulled away from the restaurant. "But what do you think of my mother?" Martin turned to her. "Impressive. Yes, she's very beautiful." Jenna answered politely. Martin laughed. "And you're good. I saw how scared you were." "Yes, she's so authoritarian. However, I'm sure that in time you will find common ground." "I don't think so," Jenna thought. She could feel in her gut how much she disliked Martin's mother. The feeling was mutual, though. He was right, though. She would have to adjust, especially at first. And then she would get used to the fact that he was now a married man, and that it was up to the two of them to decide how to live their lives. And his mother will move. That's it. But she was wrong. Adriana was an experienced warlord in the battle for her son's attention and launched a real military action against her. For example, she developed a nasty habit of coming to their apartment with an inspection at any time. Russia their plans to be patient, Jenna. She's moving in. Martin reassured the girl. Think better about the wedding. What dress to choose, who to invite? I don't have anyone. Only girls from work. Jenna smiled sadly, realizing that it was true. Before, she had never thought about the fact that she had no friends or loved ones at all. It didn't bother her at all. She was always on her own. But now she felt sad. It made her want to cry. Babe, you don't have to do anything. Everything will be all right. I promise you. Martin stroked her back, soothing her. You want to go on a honeymoon to the sea. I do. Jenna's eyes even dried up, so clearly she imagined this very sea she had never been to. It had been her cherished childhood dream, and more than once she had imagined how wonderful it would be to find herself on the shore in the foam of the surf. To rejoice in the endless blue, to sink into the gentle waves of the sea. And now this dream can come true. You are my child, smiled Martin et al. So sincere, so bright. Jenna is mine and only mine. From these words, the girl was simply flooded with tenderness. And she made a promise to herself. She would be affable and polite. And she would have everything in the wedding, and the sea and happiness. And let her mother-in-law freak out, she would have to give in. She really pulled it off, becoming the perfect hostess, nodding to everything Adriana said, rereading a bunch of books she recommended, visiting theaters and museums. Soon she even began to take part in general conversations. And one day, her future mother-in-law even complimented her and her wedding. She had a lovely, beautiful, and white dress and veil. Martin insisted on it, though Jenna was a little embarrassed. After all, the veil is a symbol of innocence, and they've been together a long time, for all intents and purposes. She shared her thoughts with Martin. He laughed a long time, explaining that nobody paid attention to that nowadays, and Jenna put on a snow-white dress and veil, which Adriana herself helped to choose, and for the first time she was very grateful to her. I feel like a real fairy tale princess. Even her mother-in-law seemed to defend herself, smiling at the guests, and generally looking like a queen mother at the reception. And then there was the sea, and it turned out to be even more fabulous than she had imagined. They spent most of their time together, really, sometimes. Martin, as it turned out, was a keen diver, and he would ask her to go on another dive. Jenna always found something to do. How can you be bored when there is the sea, the sand, the little stores with all sorts of nonsense so pleasing to the heart? And then they would meet and tell each other for a long time with laughter about their adventures. The days were full of joy. The nights, the passion. It seemed like it would go on forever. Only once a cloud clouded the horizons of endless happiness. It happened in one of the little restaurants scattered along the coastal strip. Martin had gone out for a smoke, and Jenna was alone for a few minutes. A Mexican man sat down at her table. Miss, why be sad? I'm not sad, I'm waiting for my husband. Politely, Jenna explained, hoping that the intruder would quickly leave. But he stayed where he was and smiled at her beamingly. Why a husband? Why husband? Ed, such a girl missed out. At that moment, Martin returned. When he saw the Highlander, he froze in place, and Jenna saw his eyes fill with rage. He silently shifted his gaze from his wife to his mocking guest. Martin, I don't know this man. He's already leaving quickly, the girl said. The Mexican looked back and waved a hand at Martin. The husband is lucky to have such a beautiful girl. Martin snapped out of his seat and sprang toward the still smiling man, abruptly lifting him from his seat by his chest and hitting him hard. A woman screamed beside him. Martin, what are you doing? He hasn't done anything wrong, screamed Jenna, but Martin didn't hear anything. He was silently beating his opponent, breathing heavily and making animal-like growling noises. They ran up. The men scattered them. And the Mexican, shouting threats, allowed himself to be led away. Grabbing Jenna by the arm, Martin dragged her toward the exit. She was scared and very ashamed, but she followed him obediently. Martin, Martin, what's the matter with you? Why did you do that? They were looking back at them, and Jenna was very uncomfortable. And she wanted to get as far away from this place as possible. No one dares look at you like that. He undresses you with his eyes, and you are only mine. He kept repeating, stubbornly and fumbling his way back to me, Mum's rival. You'd think he'd just come on to me for the sake of talking. Jenna coaxed him like a child. But it took Martin a long time to cool down. Then, when his sanity returned to him, he asked for forgiveness, bought her luxurious flowers. But now Jenna herself could no longer calm down and forget his twisted face and crazy eyes. He was a different man, completely unlike her soft, gentle Martin. Of course, they'd made up, but there was still some residue. And Jenna walked around the memorable restaurant afterward, for fear of bumping into the injured man. The vacation at the sea had not been in vain. Jenna returned burnt out, rested, and pregnant. This was confirmed first by the nausea that began in the morning, and then a visit to the gynecologist. Martin was happy and just showered his wife with gifts. He made sure she followed all the prescriptions. The doctor took vitamins, took lots of walks, and finally insisted that Jenna quit her job. Martin's family, she realized, was by then by no means poor. Martin was making excellent money. Adriana was fluent in several languages and tutoring. And to get to her students was considered a huge success. The relationship between her daughter-in-law and her mother-in-law could be described as politely strained. Every time Adriana visited their Jenna, she felt great tension. It would seem that she would not say a bad word, but even a glance would be enough to understand that she did everything wrong. Not the way she sat, not the way she walked, not the way she cooked, and in general, not the way she was. However, the girl had already got used to this mother-in-law manner and tried not to pay attention to her, especially since she doesn't come in that often. Adriana took the news of her pregnancy with courage. That's right, because she held herself with the look of a sufferer, who is forced by circumstances to endure unimaginable hardship. Never mind that, laughed Martin. It's just very hard for Mama to accept that she'll soon bear the title of grandmother. And as a young woman, it's not really about her. You're supposed to understand these things. Jenna didn't understand. She thought a grandmother was wonderful, that real grandmothers loved their grandchildren. She had no grandmother. It so happened that fate decided to deprive her of everything at once. And here's a man worried that he can't pass for a girl. She's over 50 years old. Maybe she's had enough, even though she can afford all the cosmetics she wants. If she wanted to, she'd pull the leather from her ass to her face like the upholstery on a sofa. But it didn't matter. Jenna now felt like she was all a vault, a vessel in which a great miracle, a new little life, had sprung up. She even moved differently, smoothly, as if carrying herself along the ground, trying not to spill. Now she had a lot of free time, and she walked around a lot, looking at passing mothers and children playing in the square. One day, as she sat with a book on a bench, Jenna called out to her, "Are you there?" The girl looked up at her. A vaguely familiar man was looking at her. "Peter, you." She remembered the look, the mocking stare of the boy from the orphanage who had bullied her the most, who'd never let her get away with it. He was the one she fought most often, defending her boundaries with. "I won't fight," the boy smiled. He sat down beside her. "Wow, you're big." "You sure are." In tone with him replied Jenna, "Except I'm married now." "Wow. And how is she doing?" "Great." Jenna smiled at her thoughts. Husband, apartment, a baby on the way. What's not to live for? Her husband is normal. He doesn't hurt her. Peter seemed to be asking in jest, but it seemed to her that her husband loved her seriously. Jenna smiled again. "What about you, Peter?" "Not married." "Not yet." Peter shrugged. "And there's no one in mind." The girl wouldn't let up. She wanted to give the boy a little jab, reminded him of his past offenses. She'd been married once. She had a husband, an apartment, a kid on the way. Peter answered and looked Jenna right in the eye. Her cheeks flushed. He's joking, isn't he? Of course he is. It's Peter. She hadn't known where to get away from him in the orphanage. For years, he'd been hurting her. And here he's sitting there so calm and talking nonsense. Maybe he's not talking about her. "Don't worry, Peter, you'll find your happiness." She said, "You must promise me something." He leaned down, put his arms around her, and suddenly kissed her soundly. Jenna tried to pull away, but he held her tight, and the kiss went on and on. "Jenna, what's going on here?" She heard Peter push her away, and she fixed her hair, feverishly figuring out how to explain the situation to Adriana out of nowhere. Hello, this is Peter. I grew up with him there in the orphanage. We met by chance. She was speaking and was aware of how much her mother-in-law doubted the truth of what she was saying. That's how they used to kiss each other on the hickey in the orphanage. My mother-in-law squinted. And in your circles, it is customary not to believe people, countered Peter. At least you shut up, Jenna mentally pleaded. I'll take care of it. You've already ruined everything. Where did you come from? Not paying attention to what he said. Adriana gave Jenna a promising look and moved regally toward the entryway. Why did you do that? Jenna shifted her eyes to smirk at Peter. Did what he pretended not to understand put that harmony in place? Why did you kiss me? Jenna wished all this hadn't happened. And what would it have cost her to go to another square in the morning without meeting Peter? There wouldn't have been any problem. Because she wanted to. Peter was undeterred, always wanting to do it. He didn't have the courage, kept waiting for the right moment. But he did. It was the most inopportune of all possible moments. Jenna almost screamed, "You don't understand. My husband is just jealous as hell, and she's bound to tell him." Why would he be jealous? Peter looked her straight in the eye. Why does he doubt your honesty? Did that ever give you a reason? No, of course not. Jenna almost cried. It's just that he's like that. He loves me madly. Yeah, all men are like that. They just hide it. I'm not like that. Peter shook his head. Okay, whatever makes you happy. Jenna, I am happy. Ardently, she shouted. And I get it now. I get it. I get it. Peter got up from the bench. It was good to see you. He turned and walked away, leaving Jenna with a mixed feeling of irritation, fear, and somehow a slight sadness. Peter was part of that former life she tried to forget, and yet his confession touched her. It turned out that this boy liked her. That was why he was so clingy to her. He just didn't know how else to get her attention. And she decided that the world was a cruel place, that she had to defend herself against it. Oh, Peter, Peter, but what a fool are you? And yet that kiss didn't displease her. That's not what you're thinking about, sternly said the girl. She was about to present the story to her mother-in-law as something out of the ordinary. He would be upset. Of course, she would have to swear that nothing had happened, and the evening would be hopelessly spoiled with a heavy heart. Jenna got up and went home. Her fears were justified. Adriana was comfortably seated in Maud's magazine chair, and Martin was sitting on the couch grimmer than a cloud. He got a bit carried away, he started. So who was your lover? Martin, don't be nervous. The mother-in-law sang sweetly. I'm sure Jenna has an explanation for what happened. What are you talking about, Jenna? It's Peter. We grew up in the same orphanage. He recognized me. He came over, we talked. And in your orphanage, it's customary to kiss in front of everyone. Adriana made round eyes. But what am I talking about? Those institutions must have very free morals, normal morals. Jenna snapped, though. It's your crazy fantasies. You're imagining things. Why are you doing this? Tell me, why do you hate me so much? Why do you hate me so much? Adriana carried her palm to her cheeks in a theatrical gesture. What is that tone? How do you talk to me? Stop it, both of you. Martin barked. Standing up, he walked over to the bar, pulled out a bottle, and poured himself a glass. Jenna stared at him with her round eyes. Concern appeared on Adriana's face, too. Martin, don't be nervous. This is too much alcohol. Is it worth it? Mother, go home. Martin's eyes turned white. We'll take care of it ourselves. Jenna was frightened. She had never seen her husband like this before. Apparently, Adriana thought the situation was getting out of hand, too, because she quickly packed up and left, citing urgent business. The couple were left alone. Martin. Jenna tried to start talking again, but her husband made a sign urging her to be quiet. She guiltily went to the other room and lay down on the bed, listening to her frantically drinking heart. For what? What had she done wrong? Yes, Peter acted recklessly, compromised her in the eyes of her mother-in-law. He didn't compromise anything. It's just her own personal issues. The mother-in-law's just waiting for an excuse to fight. There's the explanation. She managed to calm down. Half an hour later, the door fell open and a man entered the room. Martin sat down quietly beside him. I frightened you, yes. He had the same soft tone. Very unconcealed she was. I'm sorry, Jenna. Martin stroked her hand. I've had this since I was a kid. It's not even about the girl who cheated on me. Or rather, it wasn't just her. When I was very young, my father cheated on my mother. There was an amazing scandal, and after that he left home. And ever since then, there hasn't been a day when my mother hasn't reminded me that the meanest thing is cheating. She cried and screamed so much that I would start crying with her and get to the point of hysterics. And then I had a similar thing happen to me. It's my curse, I understand, Jenna said quietly. She felt sorry for Martin now, though her anger at her mother-in-law interfered with her pity. Had she thought of traumatizing her own son so morally that he was now looking everywhere for adultery? Will you forgive me? Martin, forgive me, looked into her eyes. Of course, Jenna smiled, though her heart was still peeling, and just now experienced. We're together, remember? And we'll always be together. Jenna, don't betray me, please. I just can't take it. Martin seemed to smile, but a woman's gut told me. He means it. I won't betray, she promised. They never went back to that conversation, and Jenna thought it would be forgotten. But fate proved to be a particularly treacherous one, and reasoned differently. Jenna was proving the last months of her pregnancy. Her belly was picking out even from beneath her loose tunic, and she could feel her own baby pushing inside there at times. Martin trembled over her and was ready to follow her everywhere to keep her safe from all adversity. But Jenna insisted that she would walk alone while he was at work. Admittedly, in good conscience, she treasured those moments when she could be alone without intrusive tutelage. She waited for her husband to return. Walking near the public garden, suddenly a car pulled up next to her, and a smiling face peeked out. Hi, girl, remember me? And had a good rest. Well done, boy. Yes. And the husband swooped in like a kite of jealousy, and Jenna recognized the Mexican. As a result, she felt embarrassed and smiled at him. I recognized you. That was a very foolish thing to do. Please forgive us, I understand. Do you really? The Mexican nodded. I get out of the car. You should take care of a wife like that. You are smart and beautiful. Here you go. He turned to the car and took out a bouquet of flowers. Flowers are better than no, he explained, handing the bouquet to Jenna. What don't you want? The girl tried to pull away, but he deftly handed her the bouquet and leaned over to kiss her hand. Smiling broadly at her, he got into his car and drove off. And she remained standing, holding the bouquet to her chest and smiling. You assured me you didn't know each other. Her husband's voice brought her out of her reverie. He had been watching her for several minutes when he came over, completely silent. She turned to him, still smiling. Can you imagine what an amazing encounter this is? Does he sell flowers here? How did you know? Her husband clearly didn't share her good mood. He said, confused Jenna. You see, Martin found a reason to be jealous here too. Martin, we met by chance. Well, yes, and he recognized you right away, and the flowers just happened to be at hand. Give me that. He almost snatched the bouquet from her hands and threw it and started stomping on it with his feet. Jenna couldn't stand it. Stop it right now. This is ridiculous after all. Why don't you believe me? Her husband froze, glaring at her because you're all traitors and broads in the first place. You're lying to me, aren't you? Maybe you had a baby with that goat. What are you looking at? That you figured out? Jenna stared at him with her eyes wide open, unable to believe that a sweet, loving man could turn into this monster in 1 minute. Bullshit. Why are you hurting me? She asked, pulling away from her husband. Ah, what am I? His voice was very low, which made her feel frightened. Fool of me decided to make a horny idiot. It won't work. What do you mean, Martin? What are you talking about? Mom was right. Get your stuff and get out. Got it. The girl froze in place. You're kidding, right? She was still hopeful. Get out. I don't want your breath in my apartment or in my life. With these words, Martin disappeared into the entryway, and she was left standing in the middle of the sidewalk, unable to believe that any of this was happening. The resentment boiled deep inside, making her clench into a lump. And then Jenna, the grown married woman, disappeared, giving way to her former cockiness and wariness, accustomed to defending herself from everyone. Jenna the orphanage. Turning, she staggered away from the house, from Martin, from everything she had once called happiness. She woke up. She was already at the train station, not knowing how she'd gotten here. Maybe it was because she had always liked train stations. They were like a world apart, woven of expectation and hope. She liked to look at the trains, read the names of cities, and dreamed of being in them herself. Once she was sitting on the platform, clutching her purse to her chest and involuntarily covering her huge belly with her hand. People were looking back at her, and then people were rushing past on their own business. Jenna had no idea how she was going to live her life. She would not go back to Martin's house, not even to get her things. She had her passport with her. She had some money on her card. Now she'd get on the first train she could find and go. Jenna got up with determination and went to the ticket office. "Where are you going?" the cashier asked impatiently. Jenna glanced at the lines on the sign. The train to Seattle was supposed to be here in 5 minutes. Then so be it. Without a single thought in her head, she stepped onto the train and sat down, turning away from the window. Complete indifference overtook her. It seems, if someone had told her now that in a minute her life would be over, she would have said so be it. The train moved gently away. The train door slid to the side, letting another passenger through. She didn't even glance in that direction and moved only when a familiar voice uttered Jenna's astonished intonation. "Where do you think you're going? And where is your husband?" Peter was on the train. It was so unbelievable and so out of place right now that she couldn't stand it and burst into tears. "Jenna, what are you doing?" Now he was confused. He sat down beside her, held her close to him, began to comfort her like a baby. "Don't cry, don't. You never cried. What's the matter?" She shook her head, choking back tears, and then a sharp, unbearable pain pierced her whole body. A sharp, unbearable pain. Jenna screamed, grabbing her lower abdomen and grimacing, looking at Peter. He jumped up helplessly, looking around. He opened the door and shouted into the hallway, "Help the doctor. Hurry up, the girl is sick here." And then she seemed to be torn apart in pain. People were rushing around, carrying her, putting her in their arms, taking off her clothes, and she wouldn't stop screaming until she lost consciousness. Jenna looked out the window. She opened her eyes, barely knowing where she was and who had woken her, quickly fumbling for her stomach in place. That's a good thing. So the worst of it hadn't happened. Slipping her feet into her slippers, she struggled to get up and walked over to the window. Peter loomed outside. "Well, thank God. How did you scare everybody? Where on earth have you been going? You're having a baby." Well, the conductor was quick to figure it out. Called an ambulance from the train right to the hospital. Otherwise, she could have lost the baby. Where I didn't understand Jenna's questioning, looking around. It was clearly a hospital room. But she had absolutely no recollection of how she'd ended up here. There's a little town like this on the train's route. It wasn't far from here, but it was hard to get the gist of what was going on. So they took me off the train. "What about you? You were going somewhere, weren't you?" Peter waved his hand. Business could wait. What was I supposed to do? Leave you alone in the middle of nowhere? Jenna didn't bring up the fact that she was essentially going nowhere. That wasn't what she was worried about right now. She stroked her stomach again. Aha, she realized. "Oh, you woe, mother," scolded her Peter. But Jenna didn't listen to him, stroking her belly with a blissful look. "Can I get you something sweet from the thin one? They won't let you in the ward, but I'll pass it on." Peter talked, and she didn't even understand what he was talking about, as if in a stupor. She really could have hurt the baby. "You're an idiot, Jenna." "That's right, because now she's on her own again. She'll deal with the paperwork later. Right now it's about the baby." "What's going on in here?" There's an angry voice coming from the door. "Get away from the window and lie down. The doctor will come and take a look at you. You haven't had enough adventures." Peter made fake, frightened eyes. "They are strict here." "Well, I've got some business to take care of. I've got to sort out my lodgings, but I'll be back soon. Lie down, lie down." She didn't back down. The nurse and Jenna obeyed. And then the doctor, an older woman, came in, who also chided the girl for her behavior. explaining that it was easier to get a 7-month-old baby out than an 8-month-old one. And Jenna, on stupidity, almost caused a premature birth. What to do now? Asked Jenna, looking into the doctor's eyes. Put it down, we'll observe, she shrugged. Or do not you trust the provincial hospitals? Of course I do. I was born in one myself. Jenna was ready for anything now, if the baby was okay. Then what are you worried about? The doctor condescended to smile. You are the only one in the ward, and our staff are experienced. They're feeding you well. Daddy's so caring, too. We could hardly get him away from the window. He's not Daddy. I wanted to tell Jenna, but I didn't. Why should that stern woman know about it? Where are the Moors in the provinces? How stricter one should not be frank. Tell me, to bring fruit in the market is better to take not in the store. The doctor admonished Jenna. Thank you, Vanessa. The girl nodded, reading the inscription on the name tags. Thank you for everything. Thank you. Tell me when you have a healthy baby. The doctor condescended to smile and left the room, and Jenna was left alone with her thoughts. She took off, she left. And then what? File for divorce, raise the child alone, and applaud her own ego for being all proud and independent. Yeah, and the baby will be happy without a father. When he grows up, and how will she explain to him why all the kids have 2 parents and he only has a mom? Although there's Peter, who says he's liked her for a long time. He gave up everything for her. He is only worried about one thing, but he loves her all the same. Tears came to her eyes and Jenna cried a little. It became easier, and she finally decided to look at her cell phone by ear. 74 missed calls. There were also a bunch of messages. She didn't read them. She didn't want to waste her soul. She didn't care about that right now. She needed to think about the baby, which meant nothing but peace and quiet. In her nightstand, she found a book about Jane Eyre, apparently forgotten by a previous patient. And Jenna was happy to delve into the world of other people's experiences. That's how the girl got away from life and from the man she loved. And she didn't give up and came out a winner. And she could do it. In the evening, Peter came. This time, she was allowed to go out into the hospital garden. Peter awkwardly handed her a bag full of fruit and juices. I didn't know what was best to take, so I picked up a little bit of everything. You eat everything there to wash up. Thanks, Peter. Jenna took out a red apple and happily ate. I got a room here cheap, quite awkwardly, continued Peter. Peter, you were on your way to Seattle. Jenna looked at him, trying to speak as convincingly as possible. The doctor said the danger of premature birth has passed, but it's still unclear how much is keeping me here. Go, don't change your plans. You are stubborn and always have been so. Peter sighed. I'll make up my own mind. I won't ask anyone. So the baby is born, how are you going to live? And most importantly, where? I do not know. I'll think about it later. Jenna shook her head stubbornly. Peter took her hand. Tell me what happened. Can we decide together what to do? Wouldn't you be interested? Jenna was still resisting. But Peter was still looking at her intently, and she burst out. She told the whole story of her love, trying not to cry. He listened, nodding intently, understandingly. Didn't interrupt Jenna. You understand that your Martin loves you. Only love is out of the carpet. It's hysterical. He is so afraid of losing you that he sees threats everywhere. Peter spoke softly when she stopped talking. You're a psychologist. Jenna grinned mirthlessly. Intellectually, I understand and love him, so that I am even ready to tolerate these tricks. And then what will happen if he starts snapping in front of the baby? How would that make us feel? Peter was silent. Then he patted his pockets. His face became anxious. I'm Dad. I left my cell phone at the apartment, and I've arranged to call at this time. I don't want to let a man down Jenna from lying to me for a minute. Jenna held out her phone to him. Peter got up, stepped away so she couldn't hear him talking. When he came back, he handed her the phone and sadly said, now you won't understand me. Probably consider you a traitor, but it's only fair. Jenna didn't understand, looked at him, then at the phone, which rang immediately. The favorite popped up on the monitor. What have you done? The girl was overwhelmed by a hot wave. Did you call Martin? I did not deny Peter. He has a right to know where you are and what's going on. And you have no right to decide how your child lives alone. Talk to him. You'll decide together, not on your own. How could you? I what right? Jenna was not enough words. Because I love you, you fool. Peter sighed and stood up. Just don't throw apples. That would be ridiculous. Yes, and pathetic. Sweet vitamins again. She was silent as she watched him walk off down the path. Then she answered the phone. Jenna, my love, what are you doing? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it won't happen again. She heard such a familiar voice. Come, Martin, just alone without your mother. We have a lot to talk about, she said and passed out. Martin arrived 3 hours later. She was sure she had prepared enough to talk and would act cold and proud. But when she saw him almost running down the path, how guilty his face was, she couldn't stand it and burst into tears like a little girl. He stroked her, whispered something gentle, told her how much he loved her and what a fool he had been. Jenna would be different now, he promised. I'm seeing a psychologist for anger management classes. I talked to my mom. She had a seizure. When she found out you were gone, she didn't mean it. She's just used to being alone with me. She couldn't imagine having to share her son with anyone. So she did something stupid. We talked and she understood. She promised to stay out of our lives. Give me another chance, please. And she flinched. There was too much misery in her husband's eyes. Too much I wanted to believe that he was talking excited. Martin deployed a frantic activity. He completely fascinated Vera Petrovna. And after a thorough examination, she gave her permission to transport back to the city. She did not get to say goodbye to Peter. Again, he vanished into thin air. The due date. Jenna gave birth to a healthy, strong boy, and her life took on a new meaning. She became a caring and articulate mother, striving to devote every second to her baby. Martin kept his word. He underwent treatment. There were no more breakdowns. Adriana came in infrequently, and she spent all her time with the baby. Jenna still took many walks, deftly steering the stroller alone or with Julia, a girl from a former job with whom she had become very friendly. It was a beautiful summer day when the two of them would sit in the park like this, chirping about their womanly business. Suddenly, Julia lifted her head and squinted her eyes into something visible only to her. Julia, did you see someone you know? Jenna asked. Cancer is a tricky thing. It all happened very quickly. You know, she never forgave me for daring to claim her son's love. She didn't want to share him with anyone, and she got her way even in this terrible way. How it is Peter really did not understand. Martin snapped again and got drunk. All the treatment went to waste. He had such fits that he literally lost his human form. I found him in the hospital. My friend suggested it, but he was insane. He hated me, blamed me for my mother's death. Then he went through a divorce and enlisted somewhere up north. And no sign of him at all. Peter sat down next to me. So why is the money being transferred to his son? Once wrote to forget him and arranged his life. Jenna smiled bitterly. And what have you arranged your life? Asked Peter. There it is, my life, smiled Jenna. The cocky boy grows up to be the boss. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it is good, Peter agreed. How are you doing with your life? Did Jenna turn her head to him? It didn't happen. Peter shrugged his shoulders. Maybe the problem is that I'm a one-woman man. Peter, don't start, she asked. I just calmed it down. Do not take the soul. I won't. He agreed easily. You just don't drive me away. Okay, don't decide anything. Give me time to prove to you that I can be a good friend. And then what? Well, time itself will put everything in its place. I haven't made up my mind for a long time. Peter, Jenna answered sadly. Maybe I really do need you right now. Can I come over sometimes? Peter asked. You never know. Do you want me to fix the faucet or take care of my son? While you go to the beauty salon? Peter, what salons? Jenna laughed, feeling the ice melting in her heart. I've forgotten all about makeup. I don't have time for this nonsense. I have a son now. There you go again. Peter shook his head. Jenna, don't you know how to be happy at all? Or is living for others your happiness? Sacrificing your own interests? She was silent, thinking deeply. So he was right. That's all right, we'll get it right. Rethek's voice sounded so resolute that Jenna laughed. Something new was coming into her confused life, and she seemed ready to accept it. Cancer is a tricky thing. It all happened very quickly. You know, she never forgave me for daring to claim her son's love. She didn't want to share him with anyone, and she got her way even in this terrible way. How it is Peter really did not understand. Martin snapped again and got drunk. All the treatment went to waste. He had such fits that he literally lost his human form. I found him in the hospital. My friend suggested it, but he was insane. He hated me, blamed me for my mother's death. Then he went through a divorce and enlisted somewhere up north. And no sign of him at all. Peter sat down next to me. So why is the money being transferred to his son? Once wrote to forget him and arranged his life. Jenna smiled bitterly. And what have you arranged your life? Asked Peter. There it is, my life, smiled Jenna. The cocky boy grows up to be the boss. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it is good, Peter agreed. How are you doing with your life? Did Jenna turn her head to him? It didn't happen. Peter shrugged his shoulders. Maybe the problem is that I'm a one-woman man. Peter, don't start. She asked. I just calmed down. Do not take the soul. I won't. He agreed easily. You just don't drive me away. Okay, don't decide anything. Give me time to prove to you that I can be a good friend. And then what? Well, time itself will put everything in its place. I haven't made up my mind for a long time. Peter, Jenna answered sadly. Maybe I really do need you right now. Can I come over sometimes? Peter asked. You never know. Do you want me to fix the faucet or take care of my son? While you go to the beauty salon? Peter, what salons? Jenna laughed, feeling the ice melting in her heart. I'd forgotten all about makeup. I don't have time for this nonsense. I have a son now. There you go again. Peter shook his head. Jenna, don't you know how to be happy at all? Or is living for others your happiness? Sacrificing your own interests? She was silent, thinking deeply. So he was right? That's all right, we'll get it right. Peter's voice sounded so resolute that Jenna laughed. Something new was coming into her confused life, and she seemed ready to accept it.